Hey guys, this is Fred from Pretty Games, and this is episode 3 in how to build an agar.io clone using Photon Fusion and Unity. In this episode we'll go through how to spawn food, handle collisions, and also allow players to eat each other. So now that we've added the movement to the game and that we can interact with the menu, let's add some food to the game so that we can grow in size as well. So let's go in Game Objects, 2D Object, Sprite, and select Circle. Let's rename it to Food Prefab, and let's just move it to 0, 0 and look at it in the scene view. So now we have this white object. So let's change the color of it. So we want it to be slightly green, dark green, and I actually have a hex code for it, so I'm just going to bring that in. Okay, so now we have this dark green circle. Let's make it a little bit smaller because it's a little bit big, so let's make it a quarter of the size. And then we need to be able to collide with this, so let's add a circle collider, and this will be used to detect when the player is trying to eat the food, and we'll make it slightly smaller so that there will be a little bit overlap between the player circle and this food. Okay, and then we need this to be able to detect that it's actually food, so let's add a tag here. Add tag, and let's press the plus sign and call it food, save it, and then let's assign that food. There we go. And then we need this as well to be able to interact with the network, so let's add our network object. And we also need the position to be synced between the clients. So we need a network position as well. And that should be good enough for us. So let's make a prefab out of it. And let's go into prefab, network objects, drag and drop it. And there we have our food prefab. Then we need our food prefab to be spawned, so let's go into scripts and network and open our network spawner in Visual Studio. Prefab in here, so let's add a header, food, serialist field, and our food prefab. Then we want to be able to control whether or not the food has been spawned. So let's add a boolean, is food spawned, and set it as false. And then let's have a look, and then we want our food to be able to be spawned, so let's create a method for that, or function. So there we go, spawn food, and we need to create a number of food objects, so let's just make a for loop where we loop from 0 to 300, and you can change this value to whatever is suitable for your game, but we're going to go with 300. And then we need to instantiate our network object, that we just added, our food prefab. So let's go network object, spawn object, and the runner is what is going to spawn this. And we see that we have an error here, but let's fix that later. So let's go runner, spawn, and add our food prefab and get our random spawn position, and the quaternion we can use identity, it doesn't have to be rotated. And then let's just make sure that it's actually on the position. So let's go spawn object, transform position, and get this position. Sometimes I've noticed that when you are spawning like this and provide the position, it's not actually moving correctly directly to the position. So that's why I'm setting it here. But I think this code would actually work without this now, because we're just using network position, which is not interpolated, but it just moves that right to that position. But to be safe, let's just keep it there. Then we have our problem that the runner does not exist, and the reason is because we have derived from mono behavior. And we can't derive from our regular network behavior because this network spawner is attached to our network runner. And the network runner gives a warning saying that it can't work normally, or it can cause some problems if you have that. So let's change it into a simulation behavior instead, which gives us access to the runner. Okay, so that's all good. Now we need to actually spawn our food. Actually, we need to make sure that once we have spawned the food that we are setting is food spawn to true. And when are we going to spawn the food? Well, we are going to make sure that nothing else actually happens until a player joins. So when a player is joining, then we want the server as well to populate the world. So let's check when we are the server and the food is not spawned yet, then let's spawn the food. Okay, so let's save this and try it in Unity. But before we try it, we need to assign our food object or prefab. So let's open our network runner prefab, and in the food prefab we need to assign it. So let's drag and drop that in there and save it, and then we can take it for a spin. And as the player is joining, so now we got the player joined event, and the food has spawned. So now we can just add a name and get rid of the UI. There we go. And as you see, we can move around, but no food is being collected, and that's because we are not reacting to any of the collision events. So we need to change our code to get the food pickup to actually work. So let's go into network and let's open the movement handler in Visual Studio. Now we could react to the event that will happen when a collision occurs, but instead we're going to do it with our own function because I like the control of it, and it's a little bit more reliable when it comes to fast moving objects. Even though in this tutorial our object isn't that fast moving, but still, let's do it the manual way. So we need to get our circle collider first that we have attached to our object. So let's just add that and to other components, and then in our awake function, let's grab our circle collider. So we'll use get component in children. Okay, so then we need to add a new function to check for our collision. So let's just add a new, here we go, collision check. So the collision check is going to be performed by the server. So when we have made our movement here in fixed update network, then we are already checking if we are the server, and after we have moved the object, we are going to check for collision. So in our collision check, we are going to use a overlap circle. So what we will do is we're going to do runner get physics scene 2D, which is required to get this physics scene, and then we do an overlap circle and we'll provide the sprite renderer's position, and the size that we're going to use is our the local scale in the X direction, and we divide it by 2 to get half of that, and then we do an times 80%. So the reason why we are doing this times 80% is to make it a little bit smaller than the collider or the circle actually is, so that we are not detecting the whole thing. That way we can overlap a little bit, but still not fully. Alright. But before we are doing this collision check, we need to disable our own collider. So otherwise it's going to hit that when we are doing the overlap circle check. So first of all, let's disable that one. And then once we have performed our circle or our overlap, then we can enable it again. Perfect. Then when we have done that, we can check what kind of data did we get back in our hit collider. So let's first of all check that we got something. So we're checking that our hit collider is not null. If it's null, it means that we didn't hit anything. And then we want to figure out, okay, what did we hit? in our case, we are checking for food. So let's check if our hit collider compare tag is food. And if we have hit the food, then we want to, because we are the server, we can manipulate the network objects. So if we have hit the food, we want that food to move to another location. So we're not going to despawn it. We're going to use the same food all the time. So we are moving the position and we are getting a random spawn position again. So then we have moved it. But then we need to do something as well with the player. The player should grow in size. So let's actually add a new function for that. So we're going to add after update size, let's do on collect food, and we are going to use some growth value here. So our size, our network object size or network variable size is going to grow plus equal to the growth size. So that will make it bigger. And as it grows, we actually need to update the size as well. So let's add that. Okay, so then we need to call this and on collect food, and we need to provide some type of value. So here again, you can change it to some suitable value, but 12 is a value that I found quite good, or I think it's quite good. So let's save that and go back into Unity and try it. So then let's hit play and take a first spin. Okay, so now we are connecting, we have joined, and our food is spawned, and now we can eat the food as well. And it's a little bit hard to tell, but we are actually growing in size as well. So let's just eat a few of those and see that we are actually growing. And yes, we are growing. So then we have our food management sort of done and dusted. Now we want to add the ability to eat other players as well. So let's go back and let's open our movement handler in Visual Studio. So let's go back into where we check what we hit. So instead of checking if we have hit for food, or actually, and in addition to checking if we hit the food, let's check if we hit the player. So let's do an if statement for that. Oh. If we have hit the player, then we need to get some information or get some details about the player. So the first thing we need to do is get our network player for that player. So let's go hit network player, which is a network player, and we'll do. We need to get the component, but we need to get it in parent because our hit collider is now a child of our object. So our network player is going to be in the parent. So let's get that. And then we need to figure out how big is the other player. And that is in the other player's movement handler. So let's do hit movement handler. And we can get that from get component. And then it's going to be the movement handler. Okay, so then we know what player we hit, and we know its movement handler. So then we need to check if we can actually eat the other player. So if our size is bigger than the other ones, then we can eat it. And what we want to do is we want to award the player a bit of the other player's size. So we'll give 10% of the size of the other player. So we'll take the other hit player's size and take it times 0.1. Then we'll get 10% out of that. But if the other player is really, really small, then let's make sure that we at least get a little bit more food or size than we get from collecting food. So if it's food from other player is less than 20, then let's make it 20 instead. Okay, And then we need to call our onCollectFood. So let's call that onCollectFood with a ushort. Convert this float value into a ushort. Okay, so then we've done that. The next part is we need to tell the other player that it actually died. So we are the server and we can manipulate the values of the network values. So we need some function for this. So let's go into our network player and we have our on player state changed here. So let's add on player died. And when our on player died happens, let's change the state into state player dead. And then we need to call it from here. So let's do our hit network player on player died. So that will force it to change its state and it will become dead. And when it's dead, we are going to get this on player state changed, which will then not be playing, but rather something else, which is going to be dead. And in that case, we are going to set the sprite renderer to not be active and the movement handler to be not moving anymore. But for that player, it means that the game will no longer update, or actually the game will update, but the movement will stop and nothing else will happen. So we need to show the UI again so that the player gets a chance to actually restart and or rejoin the game again. All right. So let's open our in-game UI handler and we'll add a new function on player died, and we'll take our network input field and disable it. Our status text, which will show you died or something like that, will be shown, and the whole canvas will be shown. Okay, so if we go back into our network player, or actually we need to save it and then go back into our network player, then we have in our on state changed, this is where we can actually show that. So let's check if the player state is dead and we have input authority, which means that it's our object. Then let's find the in-game UI handler and do on player died. Okay, so let's save this and take it for a spin in Unity. All right, so let's try it. And I already compiled a client as well. So let's just bring up this and give us a name and connect. And then I'll start up the client as well. Give that a name, connect. So Eddie is almost the same color, but doesn't matter. And let's chase Eddie up into the upper left corner of the screen so that Fred can find and hopefully eat him. So let's see where we are and let's eat some food while we're going there, so that we can grow a little bit in size. And yes, this is the edge of the map, which is good. And we know that Eddie is up in the left corner. So come on, let's get there. It was a fair distance to get there. Here we go. Now we can see the Fred is entering the screen, and there we go. We ate him. And on the client side, we can see, well, our nice little logo, you died, and we have a join game button, and still the game is running in the background, so we can see what is going on. But if we press join game, then we are back again, and yeah, we can move and eat our food, and we can try to eat Fred as well. And well, that was a bad idea because Fred was bigger. So that logic now works. I'd like to give a shout out to our Patreon supporters. It helps us with every single contribution that we can get. So please consider supporting us on Patreon. The link is in the description. This concludes this episode, and I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button and the bell to get a notification when the next video is out.